While camping deep in the wild forests of Montana, my son coldly abandoned me with no food and no gear, saying, "Bye, go meet the grizzly." He was sure I'd die from hunger or a bear attack, so he could claim my inheritance. But when he finally came home, I was already waiting there, smiling. "I've got a surprise for you," I told him. "You won't believe what happened next. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment to let us know where you're listening from." Suddenly, the front door burst open. Tyler stormed inside, his hoodie damp from the Portland drizzle, sneakers squeaking across my hardwood floor. "Dad, I need $5,000. Right now." I froze at my desk, pen still in my hand from going over invoices. His voice carried a sharp edge, so sharp it felt like a slap. That wasn't my son asking for help. This was someone making demands. "Tyler, what are you talking about? $5,000. Tonight." He paced back and forth across the living room, fists clenched. "I already sent your monthly allowance last week. That $3,000 barely covers my rent." His voice cracked with frustration. "You think that's enough? You think that covers everything?" My flannel shirt suddenly felt too tight. Grease still clung beneath my nails from fixing Mrs. Johnson's transmission earlier that day. I had built these auto shops from nothing, working 18-hour days after Emily died. I sacrificed everything to give him chances I never had. "Son, we've talked about this. You need steady work." "Work?" Tyler spun around, his face flushed red. "Why should I work when you're sitting on all this money? When you control everything like some dictator?" The words stung. My shoulders straightened automatically, old military habits kicking in. "I'm trying to teach you responsibility." "Responsibility?" He gave a bitter laugh. "You want to talk about that? After you die, I'll be the one running your shops. And I'll do it better than you ever did." His words poisoned the air. My chest tightened. The casual way he spoke about my death, the calculation in his eyes, it wasn't grief, it was greed. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. 20 years of single parenting, of sacrifices, of hoping he'd grow into the man his mother would have been proud of, all of it collapsed in that instant. Tyler must have seen the shock on my face. His expression shifted, realizing he'd gone too far. Without another word, he stormed to the door. The slam shook the whole house like a gunshot. The family photo on the mantel rattled, Emily's smiling face trembling behind the glass. I stood frozen, watching it slowly settle back into place. The silence pressed against my ears. Outside, Tyler's car engine roared to life, then faded into the distance. I stayed at my desk, knuckles white around the pen, staring at that picture that wouldn't stop trembling. The next morning, I reached up and straightened the photo. Emily's face smiled back at me, so young, so radiant, holding 8-year-old Tyler at his little league game. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Emily's funeral. Tyler beside me in his only suit, 3 sizes too big, clutching my hand while I tried not to collapse. The mortgage on the first shop was 3 months overdue. Emily's medical bills had drained every penny we had. I promised her, with her last breath, that I'd take care of him, that I'd give him everything she couldn't. By Thursday, I found myself flipping through old photo albums. Each page showed another sacrifice I had almost forgotten. Tyler's private school tuition, $40,000 a year, because public school wasn't good enough for Emily's boy. His years at the University of Michigan, complete with the dorm life he insisted on having. The Ford Mustang I bought him as a graduation gift, $18,000 in cash because he refused to drive anything used. I traced the edge of a photo from his 16th birthday. Even back then, there was something missing in his eyes. While other kids his age took summer jobs, Tyler spent his days gaming, living off the monthly allowances I convinced myself were an investment in his future. Looking back now, the pattern was obvious, spread out across decades of photographs. Every handout, every time I rescued him, every crisis I solved with money chipped away at his character. I thought I was being a good father. Instead, I created a stranger who could think about my death like a business deal. Saturday evening, I sat in Emily's old chair, the one I never had the heart to remove. She would have seen this coming. Emily always understood people better than I ever could. She would have pushed him toward independence, made him earn every dollar. I failed her, I whispered to the empty room. The truth sank into my bones like winter cold. For 20 years, I tried to buy Tyler's love to make up for the mother he lost. Every payment was a bandage over my own guilt, my own shortcomings. I convinced myself that providing for him was the same as parenting him. By Sunday morning, I put the photo albums back on the shelf and sat at my desk. My hands trembled as I reached for a pen and paper. Military discipline steadied my breathing. I needed to think clearly, to plan for possibilities I'd never wanted to face. The blank page stared back at me, waiting for decisions I wasn't ready to make. 1 ring. 2 rings. My pen hovered over the legal documents I'd been drafting when the phone shattered the quiet. Tyler's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, son." "Dad." "Hey, how are you?" His voice sounded too cheerful, too eager, like a salesman starting a pitch. "I'm fine. This is unexpected after what happened last week." "Yeah, about that. I was way out of line, and I want to make it right." His words came too quickly, too rehearsed. "Actually, I've got a proposal. Something that could fix everything between us." I stayed silent, letting my training remind me of the power of waiting. "Let's go camping together in Colorado. Rocky Mountain National Park. Just you and me like when I was a kid. Remember?" The suggestion hit me like whiplash. Tyler hadn't shown interest in the outdoors since high school. "This is sudden." I know. But listen, my buddies bailed last minute, and I've got these tickets going to waste. Everything's already paid for. Flights, camping gear, park permits. The whole package expires tomorrow if we don't use it. My grip on the phone tightened. The urgency sounded staged, designed to keep me from thinking it through. "Tyler, when have you ever organized a camping trip?" "Come on, Dad. Remember when you taught me to track animals? How to start a fire with wet wood? You always said the wilderness shows a man's true character." His mention of our past twisted something deep in my chest. Those had been good times, before Emily's death changed everything, before I started fixing problems with money instead of presents. "This could be our chance to reconnect," Tyler said softly. "To remember what we used to have. No distractions, no city stress. Just father and son in God's country." I closed my eyes, torn between hope and instinct, both fighting in my chest. Every logical thought screamed a warning. The timing, the sudden enthusiasm, the story about cancelled friends, it all felt staged. Yet, underneath my suspicion was something deeper. Pain. A small voice asking, what if this was real? What if my son honestly wanted to repair what we'd lost? "The flights leave March 25th, Tyler pressed. "Portland to Denver, then we drive up to the park. 5 days in the wilderness, just like old times." 5 days, I repeated slowly. "Dad, please. The tickets are going to waste. This might be our last chance to fix things." The silence stretched. I stared at the documents spread across my desk, legal papers that could change everything. Safeguards against possibilities I prayed would never come true. Finally, I heard myself say, "All right. Let's do it." "Really? That's fantastic. I'll text you the flight details. Meet me at PDX, departure gate. This is going to be amazing, Dad. You'll see." The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, my hand still trembling. Outside, Portland's endless drizzle painted shifting patterns on the window. I glanced at the documents, then at the pen in my hand. Hope and preparation, both felt like betrayal. 3 days later, I folded those legal papers and slipped them into the inner pocket of my travel bag. They felt heavier than they should have, weighted with possibilities I didn't want to face. Tyler waited at gate C12, bouncing on his heels like an overeager teenager. His backpack looked brand new, tags still dangling from the zippers. When he spotted me, his grin stretched too wide. "Dad, perfect timing. They just called for boarding." "You seem excited," I said, studying his face, catching the nervous twitch in his left eye. My training had taught me to spot false enthusiasm. Why wouldn't I be? Father-son adventure in the last frontier. He heaved his pack onto his shoulder with more effort than he let on. "When's the last time we did this?" On the first flight, he filled the air with talk about wilderness photography and fresh mountain air, though he kept checking his phone more often than someone eager to disconnect. I countered with stories from my Navy survival training: how to read weather signs, identify edible plants, navigate without GPS. "You really know all that?" Tyler asked, scribbling notes on a napkin. 20 years in the service teaches you to be ready for anything." Something flickered in his eyes, calculation hiding behind admiration. Our layover in Portland dragged longer than expected. Tyler disappeared 3 times for bathroom breaks, each lasting nearly 20 minutes. Through the big terminal windows, I watched planes taxi across the gray afternoon sky. Colorado was getting closer with every passing hour. On the final flight, mountains jutted below us like jagged teeth. Tyler pressed his face to the window, but the reflection staring back at me showed tension, not wonder. Denver hit us with crisp air and the sharp smell of snow. At the rental counter, I handled the paperwork: Ford Explorer, extra insurance, chains for the mountain roads. Tyler loaded the gear, wincing at his right shoulder like something hurt. "Outdoor supply store next," he said, eyes on his phone again. "Need to grab a few extras." At Rocky Ridge Outfitters, he was oddly specific about what he wanted: high-powered flashlights, emergency flares, rope, far more than anyone needed for a simple camping trip. The clerk, a weathered man with frostbitten scars, raised an eyebrow. "Planning on getting lost out there?" "Just want to be prepared," Tyler replied quickly. Highway 36 stretched ahead like a gray ribbon cutting through endless forest. Mountains rose on both sides, their snow-capped peaks glowing in the last of the daylight. Road signs warned about moose crossings and icy conditions. "Beautiful country," I said, trying to break the silence between us. "Yeah. Really isolated," Tyler replied, his voice carrying a strange kind of satisfaction. "Miles from anywhere." We stopped for gas as darkness started to fall. While I filled the tank, Tyler drifted toward the convenience store. Through the fluorescent-lit windows, I saw him pull out his phone and dial. His posture changed, shoulders hunched, voice low and urgent. When he came back, I asked casually, "Everything okay?" "Saw you on the phone." "Just checking weather for tomorrow," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Storm system moving in, but should clear by morning." The lie came too easy. I'd already checked the forecast myself: clear skies for the next 3 days. As we rolled back onto the highway, that old military unease settled in my gut. The same instinct that kept me alive in hostile territory. Something wasn't right. 40 miles later, it still gnawed at me. "So, what exactly did the weather service say?" I asked. Tyler's grip tightened on the door handle. "Possible snow flurries. Nothing major." The deflection confirmed my suspicions, but I kept my voice neutral. "Good thing we packed extra layers." The entrance to Rocky Mountain National Park appeared around a bend, wooden signs marking the boundary, cabins tucked among towering spruce trees. The visitor center buzzed with early morning activity, even in March. Tourists were rare this time of year. Most people here were serious outdoorsmen or locals. The Timberline Lodge Motel looked exactly like the brochure Tyler had shown me. Rustic log walls, with rooms named things like Grizzly Den and Caribou Creek. The desk clerk, a young woman with calloused hands, checked us in while Tyler studied the trail maps pinned to the wall. "First time here?" she asked. "For him," I said, nodding at Tyler. "I've been to Colorado before, military exercises." "Which trails are you thinking about?" Before I could answer, Tyler stepped up. Poudre River backcountry route. We want the full wilderness experience. The clerk's expression shifted. That's advanced terrain. Very remote. Most people start with the shorter nature trails. We're experienced campers, Tyler insisted, though his experience didn't include a single real camping trip in over a decade. Park Ranger Rachel Brooks looked like she'd stepped straight out of a recruitment poster. Confident, capable, no nonsense, the kind of person who had seen every kind of wilderness emergency. Her briefing room smelled of coffee and pine, the walls covered with maps and wildlife photos. Gentlemen, let's be clear about what you're undertaking. She spread a detailed map across the table. The Poudre River route takes you 30 miles from the nearest ranger station. No cell coverage. No other campers this time of year. She pointed to several red markers scattered across the map. We've had recent grizzly sightings here, and here. A mother with 2 cubs was spotted last week. That means she'll be protective. We've also seen wolf packs, and moose are unpredictable during spring territory disputes. Tyler leaned over the map, studying the most remote sections with a little too much focus. What about emergency evacuation? He asked. The ranger explained that helicopter rescue, weather permitting, could take days if the conditions turned bad. Ranger Rachel Brooks' stern look told me she'd seen too many overconfident tourists end up as statistics. I need to ask, she said firmly. What's your combined wilderness experience? I gave her the truth about my military background, while Tyler mumbled vague stories about camping with friends. The doubt was clear on her face. Sir, with respect, this route isn't appropriate for beginners. We've got excellent guided tours and shorter trails. We'll be fine, Tyler cut her off. My dad's practically a survival expert. After signing liability waivers and sitting through safety videos on bear encounters, we rented bear-resistant food containers and emergency beacons. I also insisted on a defensive rifle rental, a Remington 870 that felt natural in my hands. You sure about that? Tyler asked nervously. Colorado rule number 1, I told him. Never go unarmed in bear country. Our last stop was programming GPS coordinates into the emergency beacon. Ranger Brooks demonstrated with precision. Hold this button for 5 seconds, and search and rescue will get your location. But remember, in that backcountry, even with coordinates, response can take 12 to 18 hours, minimum. Loading our packs into the truck, I felt that old pre-mission tension settle in. Everything screamed warning, the remote location, Tyler's inexperience, his strange push for maximum isolation. Still sure about this route? I asked as we pulled away from the ranger station. Tyler's smile looked forced. Absolutely. No turning back now, right, Dad? The way he said it hit my ears wrong. Less encouragement, more final. In the rearview mirror, I watched the ranger station vanish behind the trees. Our last thread of civilization, swallowed by wilderness that suddenly felt more like a trap than an adventure. The forest road narrowed, branches scraping against the windows like skeletal fingers. My GPS showed us moving deeper into unmarked territory, past the last cell tower, beyond the final trail marker, into country that had already claimed the lives of the unprepared. We're officially off the grid now, I muttered, watching the signal bars disappear from my phone. Tyler gave a hollow laugh. Perfect. Just us and nature. At mile 23, the Poudre River Trail marked the end of drivable road. I parked beside weathered wooden posts that looked like grave markers in the fading light. We unloaded our packs, and the difference was obvious. Mine was balanced from decades of training. His bulged awkwardly, stuffed with gear he'd never once tested. Jesus, this thing weighs a ton, he complained, struggling with the straps. Proper packing takes practice, I said, adjusting his distribution. He winced when I touched his right shoulder. You hurt yourself? Old injury. Nothing serious. The trail wound through dense spruce where sunlight barely broke through. Moss-covered logs blocked the path. Small streams forced us to cross on slippery stones. Signs of wildlife appeared almost immediately. Huge moose tracks pressed into the mud, eagles crying high above, and, in the distance, the unmistakable howl of wolves. "You hear that?" Tyler froze, his face pale. "Wolf pack," I said calmly. "Probably 5 miles out." I kept walking, but I noticed the way his nervousness had nothing to do with wildlife. For someone who had insisted on taking the most remote route, Tyler looked genuinely shaken by its realities. 3 hours of hiking finally brought us to a clearing beside Boulder Creek, a perfect campsite. Flat ground, fresh water, and wide sight lines in every direction. My military habits kicked in automatically as I scanned for defensive positions and escape routes, while Tyler slumped onto a fallen log. "How much farther do we go?" he asked, breathing hard. "This is good for tonight," I told him. "We'll push deeper tomorrow." Setting up camp exposed even more of his inexperience. While I hung our food cache 12 feet high, placed the cooking area downwind, and organized emergency supplies for easy access, he wrestled with basic tent poles. "Dad, can you help with this?" he asked, holding up tangled guy lines like surrender flags. I showed him the proper technique, and for a brief moment it felt like the old days, back when he'd wanted to learn instead of just inherit. But something nagged at me. Why demand a wilderness trip when you couldn't even pitch a tent? That evening, the campfire threw dancing shadows across our clearing. I cooked a simple meal while Tyler sat quiet, staring into the flames with an expression I couldn't place. The temperature dropped fast. March nights in Colorado demanded respect. "Remember when we used to do this?" I tried, hoping to spark a connection. "You were maybe 10, wouldn't stop roasting marshmallows until they caught fire. Your mom was still alive then." His voice softened, carrying an unexpected sadness. "She loved those trips. Said camping brought out the best in people." Tyler nodded, but kept his eyes distant. "Tell me about your childhood, Dad. Before the Navy. Before the business. What was it like being poor?" The question surprised me. He rarely asked about my past. Still, I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told in years. Growing up in rural Kansas, working farms every summer, earning each dollar through sweat and determination. "Sounds hard," he said, but the tone felt more like calculation than sympathy. "Hard work builds character," I told him. "Teaches you the value of earning what you have." Something flickered across his face, resentment, maybe frustration, but his voice stayed neutral. "Lucky for me, huh? I got to skip all that character building." The fire crackled as the conversation carried on. Tyler kept steering me towards stories of my military years, my survival training, the skills that had kept me alive in hostile environments. Encouraged by what felt like genuine interest, I shared more than usual. "How do you know when someone's lying to you?" he asked suddenly. "Body language. Voice patterns. Gaps in their story," I said, poking the fire and sending sparks into the night sky. "Why?" "Just curious. You've always been good at reading people." Later, as I banked the fire for the night, silence settled over the campsite. Stars appeared in patterns I hadn't seen since deployment, clear, untouched, almost sacred. "I'll take first watch," Tyler said. "Not really tired yet." "You sure? We've got a long day tomorrow." "Yeah. I just want to listen to the forest." I crawled into my tent, trusting my son to wake me for the second shift. Through the thin nylon walls, I heard him moving around, adding logs to the fire, shifting into position. Ordinary camping sounds, the kind that should have put me at ease. But as sleep crept in, one thought bothered me. Why had he been so eager to take the first watch? In all our conversations, Tyler had never once shown interest in quiet reflection, or any love for nature. Why start now? The last thing I registered before exhaustion pulled me under was the change in sounds outside. No more casual steps around the fire. Just stillness. Careful, deliberate. Like someone waiting, not watching. Dawn filtered through my tent walls, pulling me back to consciousness. I heard metallic clanking outside, equipment being loaded. Too early. Too urgent for a normal morning. I unzipped the tent and stepped out into air so cold it turned every breath into a white cloud. Tyler stood by the truck, methodically packing gear with a precision I'd never seen from him. GPS, emergency beacon, rifle, food containers, every piece of survival equipment disappeared into the vehicle. "What's going on?" My voice cut through the silence. Tyler jolted, then straightened with a defiant posture. "Getting ready to leave. We planned 3 more days. What's the rush? Change of plans." He avoided my eyes, shoving gear into place. "Weather's turning bad." The lie hung there like smoke. Yesterday's forecast had promised clear skies. This morning's horizon showed no clouds. My military instincts, quiet since we'd arrived in Colorado, suddenly screamed warnings. "Tyler, talk to me. What's really happening here?" Something snapped in his expression. Years of controlled resentment broke free, flooding his face like a dam giving way. "You want to know what's happening? I'm done. Done with your control, your manipulation, your constant judgment. Son, I don't understand. Don't." He spun, fists clenched. "Don't call me son. Sons don't get treated like employees. Sons don't have to beg for money while their father sits on millions." The venom in his voice hit me like blows. This wasn't sudden anger. This was hatred, cultivated, festering for years beneath the surface of our family. "I've given you everything. You've given me nothing." Tyler's voice cracked with rage. "You made me dependent. You kept me weak. You controlled every part of my life with your damn checkbook. Well, guess what? I'm taking control now." My hands shook as the truth hit me. The camping trip. All of it had been a setup. Finally catching on, military genius? His laugh held no warmth. "Took you long enough. Why, Tyler? If you needed money, we could have worked something out. I don't want your allowance anymore, Dad. I want what's mine. The business. The assets. Everything you've dangled over me my whole life." The cold air seemed to freeze around us. I stared at the stranger wearing my son's face, speaking words that shattered 20 years of love and sacrifice. "You're planning to leave me here. Very good. Yes. I'm leaving you here to figure things out for yourself. Maybe 30 miles of wilderness will teach you what real dependence feels like." My chest tightened. "Tyler, this is bear country. Without equipment. Without GPS. Should have thought of that before you made me your puppet." He slammed the tailgate shut. "Maybe you'll survive. Maybe you won't. Either way, I get what should have been mine years ago. Please." The word clawed its way out of my throat. "Whatever I did wrong, we can fix it. Don't do this." For a second, something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe, or remembered affection. But then it hardened into something unrecognizable. "Goodbye, Dad." He climbed into the driver's seat. The engine roared. "Try not to meet the grizzlies too quickly," he said coldly. "I want you to have time to think about what you created." The engine roared to life. I stepped toward the truck, desperate to reason with him, but he slammed it into reverse and pulled away. Through the windshield, I caught one last look at his face. Cold, calculated, stripped of anything resembling a son. "Tyler!" My shout echoed off distant mountains as the truck disappeared around a bend. The sound of the engine faded until there was nothing left but silence. 30 miles from the nearest human being, standing on an empty dirt road in the vast Colorado wilderness. Dust swirled around my boots, then settled. The silence was absolute. No human voices. No mechanical noise. Only wind moving through the spruce and the cry of a hawk circling above. For a moment I just stood there, frozen, the weight of it pressing down on me. My son, the boy I raised, protected, provided for, had just sentenced me to die. The dust from his truck still hung in the air when instinct finally cut through shock. Training took over. Shock was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not 30 miles from civilization, in Grizzly country. I forced steady breaths, letting decades of Navy discipline guide me. Rule 1. Assess resources. I patted my pockets. Wallet. Keys. A small folding knife I'd forgotten. That was it. No food. No water. No GPS. No beacon. Just the clothes on my back. Rule 2. Evaluate the environment. March in Colorado meant freezing nights. Thick spruce forests. No marked trails. Ranger Brooks' voice replayed in my head. Grizzlies, wolves, unpredictable weather. Rule 3. Prioritize survival needs. Shelter. Water. Signaling. Navigation. In that order. I studied the sun. East led deeper into wilderness. West would eventually take me toward the main park road, though how far, I didn't know. I recalled scraps from the ranger's map, rivers running northwest toward the boundary. Movement was critical. Standing still meant death. I set off west, following the faint tire tracks Tyler had left. Within 100 yards, the tracks split from what looked like an animal trail. Game trails often led to water, maybe even open ground for visibility. I turned onto it. Every step was work. At 58, my knees ached with the uneven ground, and I was far from my military peak. But anger fueled me. Anger at Tyler's betrayal. At my blindness. At the years wasted enabling him. The forest closed in like a tunnel. Massive trees blocked out light, leaving me in twilight even at midday. I broke branches as I went, crude markers for any rescue attempt, though the odds seemed slim. Signs of bears were everywhere. Claw marks, paw prints, fresh scat. I kept making noise, remembering the ranger's warning, never surprise a bear. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son had put me in a situation where grizzlies might not even be the worst danger. Hours passed. My throat turned dry, then parched. The trail twisted through heavy brush. I lost it more than once, forcing myself to backtrack. Exhaustion gnawed at my legs, but stopping meant losing daylight. Then, I froze. A sound. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Human. Engines. Multiple engines. I held still, listening. North. Half a mile, maybe less. ATVs. Hope surged through my chest. I pushed toward it, thrashing through undergrowth, clothes tearing, branches clawing at my face. The sounds grew louder, definitely all-terrain vehicles, moving slow, almost like they were sweeping the area. The forest thinned. A clearing opened ahead. 200 yards. Engines idling. I broke through the tree line, stumbling into the open. 4 ATV riders had stopped for lunch. They looked up in shock, seeing me scratched, disheveled, clearly out of place this far from civilization. The lead rider, a bearded man in his 40s with the weathered face of someone who lived outdoors, killed his engine and walked toward me with professional concern. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" My voice came out raw, rasped from thirst. "My son. He left me. Took all our gear. Drove away." The man's face shifted from concern to disbelief. "Someone abandoned you? Out here? That's attempted murder." He extended a hand. "Name's Daniel Price." I swallowed, my throat burning. "My son Tyler brought me on this camping trip." I struggled to explain without spilling every detail of my family's dysfunction. "He took our truck. All our survival gear. Said he was leaving me to die." "Jesus," the bearded man muttered, pulling off his helmet. Intelligent eyes studied me, weighing my condition and my story at the same time. "I'm Daniel Price. Used to be a ranger here. These are my friends. We're doing a backcountry tour." The others gathered, their faces showing the horror only true outdoorsmen feel when hearing about deliberate abandonment in the wild. A woman in her 30s handed me a water bottle, and I drained it gratefully. "How long ago?" Daniel asked, his voice turning sharp, professional. "This morning. 4 hours, maybe." He glanced at his companions. We need to get you out. Radio's spotty down here, but from higher ground we can reach the station. There's something else, he tapped his GPS. If your son took the main road, it's at least a 6-hour drive to Denver. But I know a shortcut. Old Ranger Trail through the backcountry. We can have you at the park entrance in 90 minutes. The implication hit like electricity. You mean, I could get back before him? Easily, Daniel said. The question is, do you want law enforcement waiting, or do you have something else in mind? Something hardened inside me, replacing the fear I'd carried since morning. Tyler had planned my death. He'd counted on helplessness. But he'd underestimated two things: the solidarity of the wilderness community, and the survival instincts I still carried. I want to get back to the motel first, I said carefully, before I decide anything about police. Daniel nodded. Climb on. We'll take the Ranger Trail. Your son will never see us coming. The ATVs roared to life, weaving through a hidden network of service paths, routes only rangers and serious backcountry guides ever knew. Creek crossings, steep climbs, fallen timber that forced us to dismount and guide the machines by hand. Daniel navigated with the confidence of a man who had done it 100 times. I spent 15 years as a ranger, he shouted over the engine. Seen a lot of bad judgment calls. But abandonment like this? That's criminal. Despite the rough terrain, we made excellent time. 90 minutes later, we broke out onto pavement, the Timberline Lodge Motel coming into view. Its log walls looked almost holy after what I'd endured. I scanned the lot. No sign of our rental truck. Looks like your son's still driving, Daniel said. You've got time to prepare whatever reception you're planning. The group gave me their contact info, promising to serve as witnesses if it came to legal action. Daniel pressed a card into my hand, his personal cell written on it. Call me when you're ready. What your son did, there need to be consequences. As they prepared to leave, Daniel hesitated. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly are you planning when he gets back? I glanced toward the motel room where our things waited. Then down at my jacket pocket. Inside, folded tight, were the legal documents I'd carried from Portland. Tyler had spent years planning my destruction. Now it was my turn to plan his. I'm going to give him exactly what he wants, I said quietly. Just not the way he expects. Back in the room, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. Daniel's card lay beside me. His offer to call authorities right away was tempting, but first, I needed to be certain. The papers I'd drawn up 3 weeks ago, back in Portland, now felt like prophecy. I spread them across the desk, reading the language I'd worked out with my lawyer. Tyler would inherit nothing. Every asset would go to wildlife conservation, veterans groups, and a scholarship in Emily's name. The irony was perfect. His attempt to kill me for inheritance would leave him with exactly 0. But legal documents alone weren't enough. I needed evidence. Witnesses. Proof that would follow him for the rest of his life. I dialed Daniel's number. He picked up on the first ring. William, you settled in. All right, I said. I need your help with something specific. When Tyler comes back, I want everything documented, his words, his reaction, all of it. You planning to confront him before we call the cops? I'm planning to give him exactly what he thought he wanted, the chance to inherit my business. Right up until the moment he realizes what he's actually done to himself. Silence stretched. Then Daniel finally spoke. That's strategic. You want me there as a witness? Daniel asked. If you're willing. And maybe bring that digital camera from the trail. Tyler's going to say things that a jury should hear. What time are you expecting him? I did the math. Main Park Road. Highway toward Denver. He'd probably stop for gas, maybe food. Tyler always drove cautiously on unfamiliar roads. Between 9 and 10 tonight, he'd come back tired, overconfident, expecting to find an empty room and a grieving father who never made it out of the wilderness. Instead, he'd find me, very much alive and very prepared. Daniel agreed to arrive by 8:30. After hanging up, I called my attorney in Portland. The conversation was short but decisive. Tomorrow morning, the new will would be filed, no matter what happened tonight. Tyler's inheritance would evaporate the moment those papers hit the courthouse. Next, I arranged an adjacent room for Daniel. The motel clerk, an older woman who'd clearly seen decades of mountain town drama, didn't ask questions. Evening settled in with a strange calm. I showered off the dirt, changed into clean clothes, and set the stage with military precision. The legal documents were spread across the desk, front and center, where Tyler would notice them immediately. Daniel's camera would have a clear line of sight from the connecting room. My phone was programmed with 911 on speed dial. Preparation eliminated variables. Tonight, Tyler would walk into a controlled environment. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had planned my death out in the wilderness. Now I was planning his social and financial death in civilization. The difference was mine would leave him alive, to face consequences. At 8:15, Daniel knocked softly. He entered with his camera gear and the grim face of a man who had seen too many tragedies in the backcountry. Recording equipment's set up next door. Audio and video on everything. He gestured to the connecting door. When he arrives, it'll all be documented. What happens legally when this goes to the authorities? I asked. Attempted murder in the first degree. Colorado takes abandonment seriously. With your testimony, my statement, and his words tonight? He's looking at prison. I nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction in my chest. Then we wait. Outside, the night pressed around the motel like a closing fist. I watched the road through the window, waiting for headlights. My phone showed 8:47 p.m. Any minute now, my son would discover that his perfect crime had turned into his perfect downfall. Headlights swept across the lot. I knew the sound of our rental truck instantly. Tyler had returned, probably rehearsing a grief-stricken phone call in his head, preparing to report my tragic disappearance. I positioned myself in the chair facing the door, documents clearly visible on the desk. Through the wall, I heard Daniel adjusting his camera. Everything was ready. The key scraped twice before it caught. The door opened. Tyler stepped inside, cautious, expecting emptiness. The overhead light spilled across his face, and recognition hit him like a physical blow. "Dad!" The word broke out strangled, disbelieving. "Hello, son," I said evenly. "How was your drive?" Shock flashed, then terror. His legs buckled slightly. He gripped the frame, eyes darting for escape. I don't understand. I left you 30 miles from nowhere. No food. No water. No gear. Yes, I said calmly. I remember. And interesting choice of parting words, by the way. Go meet the Grizzlies. Really captured the sentiment. Wait, Dad, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I rose from the chair, my voice still conversational. You brought me to Colorado to murder me for money. You researched the most remote routes, planned my death, even practiced your shocked routine for the police. His mouth opened and closed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. The problem with your plan, I continued, is you underestimated the wilderness community. Out there, people help each other survive. Unlike you. Look, if this is about money, it was always about money for you. My voice sharpened. Every trip. Every conversation. What I thought was father and son, you were just calculating my net worth. I walked to the desk and picked up the will. Want to hear something fascinating? 3 weeks ago, after our last fight, I changed this. Called it paternal disappointment at the time. Tyler's eyes locked on the papers in my hands. What do you mean, changed? I mean, you inherit nothing. Not the shops, not the accounts, not even the house your mother loved. Everything goes to charity. Wildlife, veterans, scholarships. The color drained from his face. You can't do that. I'm your son. You were my son. This morning you became something else. A man who calculated his father's death for money. Dad, please, if you'll just. I listened this morning. I listened when you said I deserved to die out there. I'm done listening. His composure cracked. You self-righteous bastard. You created this. Your control, your manipulation, dangling money, keeping me dependent, judging me. There it is, I said. The real Tyler. You want to destroy me? Fine. But remember, you made choices. Murder was yours alone. I felt calm settle in my chest. You're right about one thing. I did enable you. I bought your affection. I mistook providing for parenting. That's my failure as a father. Then change the will back. Fix it. The will was filed this afternoon. It's done. I walked past him to the door. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. You're wrong about one thing, I told him. I didn't create your willingness to kill. That's on you. Where are you going? His voice cracked. To call the police. Attempted murder is still a felony. Dad, wait. I paused at the threshold. Goodbye, Tyler. In a strange way, you gave me clarity. About who you really are. The last thing I saw before stepping out was my son collapsing into the chair, staring at the papers that ended everything he thought he'd gained through my death. The fluorescent lights in the Denver Police Department buzzed overhead as Detective Laura Stevens reviewed the evidence. Daniel's recordings. My sworn statement. Tyler's own words from the motel. It was overwhelming. Mr. Harper, she said, I've worked wilderness crimes for 8 years. This is the most premeditated attempted murder I've ever seen. She clicked through the audio. Your son's statements are damning. He always was thorough when he wanted something, I said. The DA will file charges this morning. Attempted murder, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud. Colorado doesn't treat abandonment lightly. Through the glass, I saw Tyler in cuffs being processed. Overnight in jail had stripped away the charm. No manipulation. Just a 28-year-old facing the consequences of calculated evil. Daniel sat beside me, ready to testify. What's the likely sentence? I asked. 15 to 25 years. Depending on a plea. I watched my son, and felt no victory. Just inevitability. Will you be heading back to Portland soon? Detective Stevens asked. Tomorrow. I need to see my attorney here first. Finalize estate planning. She nodded. Making sure your new will is secure. I gathered my jacket. I'm establishing a foundation in my late wife's name. Seems right that Tyler's inheritance helps people who actually deserve it. Daniel and I stepped into the crisp Denver morning. Traffic moved with that mountain city rhythm. Steady, practical. What happens now? He asked. Back to business in Portland. Back to figuring out what kind of man I'll be with the time I've got left. The front range rose beyond the skyline, sharp against the light. Turns out surviving your own child's murder attempt brings clarity. You planning to visit him during the trial? Daniel asked. I thought hard. The instinct to remain a father warred against reality. No. The man I raised died in those woods yesterday. What's left isn't my son. At his truck, Daniel handed me a card. If you ever want to come back here the right way, camping, fishing, call me. First trip's on me. Why would you do that? Because you survived what should have killed you. And instead of letting it make you bitter, you're turning it into something good. That's worth supporting. I shook his hand with real gratitude. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me. Thank the wilderness community. We look out for each other. As he drove away, I called my lawyer in Portland. There were scholarships to fund. A foundation to build. A lifetime of enabling to undo. Tyler had brought me to Colorado to die for money. Instead, I learned to live for purpose. In trying to destroy me, he'd accidentally taught me the difference between providing for someone and truly caring. The irony was perfect. Perfectly just. 3 days later, back in Portland, I received a letter from him. 5 pages of manipulation dressed as apology. Promises to change, if only I'd reconsider. Explanations about how prison would ruin his life. I read it once, then fed it into the shredder. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder. No matter how much money you've poured into them. If you like this story, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left.